Shut the door and have a seat, because tonight we're talking about Mad Men episode 711, Time in Life, on What's on the Box? Hi, I'm James.
And I'm James.
And this is What's on the Box, where we discuss the latest episode of your favorite TV show.
This week we're talking about what I see as a direct sequel to the season 3 finale, Shut the Door, Have a Seat. Not only is it the same writing team, Aaron Levy and Matthew Weiner, but we see a lot of mirrored images to that triumphant episode in this episode, which is mostly about failure.
We find out pretty early in this episode that McCann is planning to absorb SC&P, and Don makes a move and says, hey, let's start SC&P West, and you're like, all right, we're wheeling and dealing again. It's another Shut the Door, Have a Seat. And you think it's gonna be like that, but it ain't.
No, the rug is totally pulled out from under everybody. Just like in that previous episode, we get news from a outside partner that the firm is going to be absorbed into something larger. In both cases, it's McCann. And just like in that previous episode, Don sees an opportunity that he can seize and use his Don Draper wiles to get everybody out and save the day. But unlike that previous episode, it totally crashes and burns.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that it's just one of many failures throughout this episode. It seems like everything the characters try to do blows up in their faces.
We don't get a single kind of successful moment from any character in this episode.
I mean, not only are they're failures, but they don't even get to finish their thoughts in pretty much every case. Ken tells them, I've played with you enough, no.
Wait, you mean Ken Cosgrove account?
You're right, he's not Ken Cosgrove accounts anymore.
No.
He's just an account.
And not anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, to Ken.
To Ken. Jim Hobart tells Don, just stop right there, sit down, no. McDonald tells Pete, just stop right there. It's not about your daughter's grades. It's about the Campbell clan stabbing us in the back.
But the king ordered it. True story.
Yeah, actually based on truth, and I have heard that a pivotal moment in Game of Thrones was based on that historical truth.
Yes, that's also an inspiration for one of the big moments in our other series. Watch What's in the Box Game of Thrones, also on Practical Folks.
If they're watching this one, they're probably watching Game of Thrones.
That's true. Congratulations on watching both.
Were you gonna say sophisticated?
And I wasn't. But yeah, nobody comes out on top. Peggy has that colossal fuck up with the girl and the staple and that argument with her mom.
And just all of her maternal instincts.
Yeah, that's
fail.
true. Mm-hmm.
But it produces some great comedy moments.
This goes back to the kind of cringe comedy that we saw last week with Glenn. Like, it's something that Mad Men excels at, and they capitalize it again this week with Peggy.
I just love when that little girl goes and hugs her.
Glad that's you.
That's a nightmare.
What?
That's just like, I would be so like Peggy in that situation.
If you got a hug from a child?
I wouldn't know what to do.
It's love, Jim. You don't know what to do with love?
It's still very awkward.
That's the thing about this episode, though, is it's a comedy. It's just straight up funny from the very first shot where the waiter moves and you see Pete sitting there all disgruntled with Ken. From start to finish, it is hilarious.
Ken's sheer delight in putting Pete through the ringer is great, and then we get the great Vincent Kartheiser reading of poop.
Germ killer makes people think of poop.
And the great Vincent Kartheiser reaction to when Roger says that Ken enjoys making Pete uncomfortable. Pete's just like, yeah.
He doesn't even try to fight against it. He's so committed to trying to do a good job, and then fails at it.
Yeah, they don't get Ken. He does get C-Core laxative.
That's one of the great moments of this episode too, because when Pete comes out of his scene with Trudy and he's like, wait a second, do you have a phone? Everything that they've set up in this episode is he's gonna call Ken, he's gonna get Ken, Pete's gonna be the one to save the day, and then he comes in and his big coup is C-Core laxatives, which is poop. The bait and switches that happen throughout, which are playing off of, I think, the audience's memories of Shut the Door, Have a Seat, is so great. And it's like, they're gonna get Ken. Nope. Don's gonna save the day. Nope. Peggy's gonna, show that she has some maternal instincts with this girl. Nope.
You know, amidst all that failure, like we said, it's a funny episode. And I think that works because despite all the professional failure that these characters are facing, there's a lot of emotional success in their relationships, more than we have ever seen. These characters are not exactly known to be friendly and warm and cuddly towards each other, but in this episode, almost every scene with two characters ends on a very supportive, very friendly note.
You really get the sense that there's an emotional success that comes out of these professional failures, and there's a kind of character-driven upswing to the hammer that falls on the firm. The most explicit example is probably Ted. He has no problem really going back to McCann because he's kind of given up anyways. He can just do his work, and he gets his pharmaceutical, which is something he referenced in the forecast as his end-all be-all. And he's got this lovely college friend that he's finally reconnected with after all these years, and Ted is finally in a place where he seems like he can be happy. It's a resigned happy. You can see the kind of stress of the last couple of years on his face.
To me, it's more of like he says, relieved. It's like a president leaving office. You know, you just had all the stresses of your job, and all of a sudden it's taken away from you.
That's a very good way of putting it. I think that now he sees there's an optimism. Mm-hmm. There's a personal optimism in Ted that I think really, to a lesser degree, trickles down to all the characters. Joan, for instance, has this new romance that she seems very happy with. She calls Richard Berghoff, and he's immediately very supportive. He flies out to New York, something that Greg would never do, something that Roger probably wouldn't do. So there's a hope for Joan, even though professionally it seems like she's ruined.
Yeah, she gets no support from the rest of the partners about getting Avon to go with them, and Jim Hobart doesn't give her a nice, juicy account.
No, and as we saw early in this half season, the boys at McCann don't take too kindly to Joan.
And yeah, maybe it's Ted's contentment that leads to that really sweet moment with him and Don. That's just one of the many character moments that's very supportive, where he apologizes for taking Don's spot. And Don's like, no, it's cool. Those two have been rivals all throughout the history of this series. From back when they were in separate agencies to even after the merger. Don getting Ted super drunk, Ted taking Don up in the plane and making him uncomfortable. And it's nice to see them finally on equal ground respecting each other.
A lot of those character threads are wrapped up. We have a really nice moment with Joan and Pete when they're in the taxi, which we don't get a lot of Joan and Pete.
Their biggest moment was definitely Jaguar.
Absolutely, which was not a happy moment.
No, but since then, I think they've had this kind of mutual respect. Ever since that moment, Joan has always seemed supportive of Pete and his ideas, and laughing with him in meetings, and Pete in turn has been supportive of Joan and takes her seriously.
Yeah, they definitely have a mutual respect, and Pete's still Pete. He says everything's gonna be okay, but he says you should have said that. So they're still themselves, but there's a resolution to that.
Yeah, it was a tense conversation that ended on a supportive note.
They don't know who they're dealing with.
And I think that we get that with all of our main characters.
With Peggy and Stan.
Absolutely, with Peggy and Stan. That scene where he kind of figures it out, lets her bring it up, that's just a really sweet, genuine moment between two very close friends.
And they have been close, but her telling him about that, about something that only Don and Pete know about.
As far as we know, only Don and Pete.
And Colin Hanks.
Yeah. And now she's kind of let Stan into that upper echelon of people who are close to her. And I think that we really get the payoff to that in the following scene that they have, where he calls her from his office and she says, can you stay on the phone? I think that that's just such an excellent way of showing where these two characters are at.
I still wanted a hug. We came so close to getting a hug.
But that's their hug. You know, that's their relationship.
Peggy's not really the hugging type.
No.
As that kid can attest to.
Glad that's you.
It's just another example of how, if this were the last episode, I'd be okay with that. We even get a really great moment with Don and Roger. When Roger leaves the bar and gives that kind of head hug and kiss.
We finally got a kiss between Don and Roger. The best romance throughout the whole show.
Not the kiss that I'm sure a lot of the internet wanted. That was such a sweet, real moment. Don saying, in another lifetime, I'd be your chauffeur. Roger acknowledging that this is the end for Sterling, the Sterling name.
Yeah, that's deep. I never really thought about that before.
And Don, even with a wink to Dick Whitman.
What's her name?
There are so many loose ends that are addressed in as satisfying way as we're going to get out of a Mad Men episode. It really pays off on an emotional level. It's funny, it's sweet, it's endearing. It's the characters making the best of a bad situation, which is everything that goes back to the pilot, where Don pulls the "it's toasted" pitch out of nothing. Failure and pulling success out of the jaws of defeat. That's really what Mad Men has kind of been about, and it's all addressed here in a really satisfying way.
And that last shot of Don trying to rouse the troops with a patented Don Draper speech and it failing, just everyone evacuating the office, it's sad, but it's beautiful.
Exactly.
Who'd have thought that Mad Men would have an episode with the message of it's okay if you fail at your job as long as you have strong relationships with the people around you.
Yeah. The final line even, Don saying to the crowd, this isn't the end, it's a beginning.
Honestly, I don't know where we're gonna go for these last 3 episodes.
Well, what I think that's going to happen is we're going to see the end of Sterling Cooper, the agency. The closing of the doors at Sterling Cooper is going to be the end of the story that this show is telling. But be that as it may, this would have worked.
Even Pete got some redemption in his masculinity. He got to defend his wife and punch a guy. We're talking about a guy who's just punched in the face over and over, and he finally got to stand up for himself and his wife. One last thought, this episode was directed by Jared Harris.
I'm glad you brought that up.
There were so many beautiful shots of the partners.
That Last Supper shot in the McCann boardroom is phenomenal. It echoes the end of season 5 very well. We see in the bar, there's another great group shot, and just behind them, a 2-top with 2 empty seats. It's a nice subtle nod to the dearly departed partners.
Well, that about covers our discussion of Mad Men 7-Eleven Time in Life. God, I kind of just wish this had been it.
Do you think this could have been it? We definitely do. Share your thoughts, and we'll discuss further in the weeks to come as we gear up for the actual finale.
Until then, I'm James.
And I'm James.
And this has been What's on the Box?
There are only 2 episodes left until the series finale of Mad Men.
That video's the best. Yes, that's a great channel.
I subscribed. Me too.
Did you subscribe?
I can't wait to subscribe.
I need you to subscribe to the channel. My channel.